Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Agile Pmp. This is CJ Mills here, giving you guys everything you need to know about project management and how you can apply it to your lives. So, really motivated today because we started out with the basics of project management and we sort of began a different tone of delivering this content to you guys. But I'm really motivated to talk about the critical path with you guys because that's where we left off. We left off talking about the schedule. So, quick announcement: today is the 10th episode of the Agile PMP. So this is sort of a milestone, or a first for us, right? We've reached that double digit. So hopefully you guys have been finding this information incredibly helpful. And again, share this video with everyone because there's a ton of people who have projects going on and they need to know this information. So let's recap. We started off by talking about what a project is in conjunction with what is project management. So just to recap, projects are always temporary. They have a beginning, start, and an end date. All right, so they're definitely there's a point A and a point B, and they produce something unique, something specific, a one-off. Right, it can't be repetitive. That would be operations. That would be like a manufacturing facility. So projects, they're unique and they have a temporary start and end date. And you wanted to start by thinking about what your goals are as a person or as an organization. Maybe it's a startup, maybe it's a large company, or it's just you. But what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve next? And then where does this project fit along that line? So like along the spectrum of success for you, where does this project fit? And what are the goals of this project? And then is it aligned with the goals that you have for yourself or your company or your organization? Right? And if they're not aligned with it, then that's okay too, but just understand why. And once you've got that, then figure out all the players that are involved. So who's going to be affected by your project? Who has an interest in what you're doing? And how are those interests going to be affected either negatively or positively? So it's not just people who are going to help you out with the project or who is going to be involved or who you may hire or you may consult with, but it's going to be people that might be affected that have no idea that your project is happening, but you're going to affect them. So it could be family members, friends. In the last episode, we talked about writing a book. And so the content of your book could essentially affect some people because they're going to read it, and even though you might not mention names, they're going to realize, my goodness, you're talking about me. So these are all stakeholders. Figure out who are all those folks involved, and then figure out how they're going to be affected positively or negatively, and come up with a likely response. Just in case they sort of act that way, you've already got that in your back pocket. So that's the beginning. That's sort of how you initiate and sort of start your project, just with the goals and who are the players that are involved. So you start by then developing this project management plan, and you go by collecting all the requirements from all of those stakeholders, all those people that you identified that are going to be impacted positively or negatively. You go and you collect their requirements. And not that you're going to meet all their requirements, but you want to at least go and figure out what it is that they want, in terms of how they're going to be affected by this project. So now that you've got that list, then you go out and you define what the scope of the project is. And one of the important things that we were talking about is making sure that you guys really call out what the project isn't. All right, so in your scope statement, it's what the project is, what the project isn't, how you're going to get it done, and how you'll know that you're successful. How will you sign off on it? How will you complete it? A lot of times, especially with large companies in their scope statements, they'll just say, well, this is in scope and this is out of scope, or this is what we're doing and this is what we're not doing. But you've got to call this out. I mean, it's sort of like, if you're going to paint a house, you can't just say what's in scope painting a house and what's out of scope painting the driveway. You've got to say we're actually going to paint this house. That's what's in scope. What's out of scope is we're not painting the driveway. And how are we going to do the work? We're going to roll it, or we're going to brush it, or we're going to spray it. And then how we're going to get sign off? Well, somebody's going to come in and take a picture of it, or they're going to touch the wall and feel, is it satin? Is it semi-gloss? Is it flat paint? All right, so what's in scope, what's out of scope, how you're going to do the work, and how you get sign off. That's the idea. All right, and so then once you got that, then you want to start to break down your work. You want to start to break it down from a big, take this big problem and make it into a bunch of little problems. And those little problems then you'll be able to solve. And then from those little problems, then you can break those down again into activities and put them in their order. So that's where we left off last time. All right, so we had the goals of your project, identifying all the key players, getting the requirements from those key players, breaking that down into a list of what you're doing, what you're not doing, how you're going to do it, and how you'll get sign off. And then, from there, breaking it down into smaller packages so you could sequence out the activities. Okay, so now we get to what I'm motivated for, which is talk to you guys about the critical path, because you'll hear a lot of people throw that out. oh, this is on my critical path, I can't get it done, you're blocking me from getting my work done, this is on the critical path. And the whole idea is, well, do you really know what the critical path is? Have you taken time to understand what the critical path is? And so that's what I want to give you guys today. I want you to understand this term, this critical path, so when people throw that out there, you know what they're talking about. And you can figure out what the critical path is for your own project. All right, so let's just talk about the definition first. Critical path. Critical path is, number one, represents the quickest amount of time that you actually can complete your project. Whether that's 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, the critical path will show you the quickest amount of time that you can complete that project. It is also the longest chain of activities that you guys are going to have. So once you figure out all the activities it's going to take to complete your project, you put them in order, then that chain of activities that has the longest duration, that becomes your critical path. And you would find this by doing what's called a forward and backwards pass. So you'll start with each activity, you'll add the duration to that activity, and then when you figure out, in relationship, whether it's a finish to start, start to finish, we're going to cover that on another day. But then you figure out, you do a forward pass, and you take the activity that had the longest date, and you add a day to that activity, and you keep going back and forth like that. You keep adding the duration to the early start so that you get the early finish, and then you take the longest early finish, add one, and you get to the next activity, so on and so forth. So we'll cover this perhaps in our Wednesday workshop, depending on the feedback that you guys give me, and in terms of how deep you want to go with that. But for most projects, you don't have to go that deep. You just got to figure out your activities in sequence, and what's the longest path. You'll do that forward and backwards pass. You'll figure out the float, meaning how long can I delay one activity before I delay the start of another activity, or how much delay time do I have in a whole chain or whole path of activities, or how much time do I have versus my estimated end date and my delivery date. Right, so that's float, different types of float, free float, project float, total float. Again, we can get into that on the Wednesday workshop depending on what you guys come back with. So once you've done that, and you've done your forward and your backwards pass, and you figured out the float, then your critical path is going to be the longest chain of activities with the least amount of float, normally zero. And normally zero because when you first do this, math is sort of objective, it's absolute, so you should have a zero. But as you start running your project, you could get some delays here or there, so you could have some float upon your critical path. So you guys can Google critical path, and you could Google the forward and backwards pass. CPM is an acronym for that, critical path methodology. PDM is another acronym for that, for precedence diagramming method. These are the technical terms for those of you aspiring PMs. For those of you folks who just want to get your projects done, it's just critical path. All right, so you can Google those, you can get some worksheets, and you can figure out how to do that forward and backwards pass, and you can find your critical path. If you guys need help, let me know. All right, feel free to reach out. I can show you some quick and easy ways to do this. I can email you some examples. So I'm looking forward to your feedback as always. I'm very excited to bring critical path to you guys in this sort of milestone 10th episode that we have of the Agile PMP. So stay tuned for again our daily stand-ups that we have. A quick blurb on some topics of project management, and then our Wednesday workshop where we'll follow up based on the questions that you guys have. And it could be that we go into the more deeply into the critical path, forward or backwards pass, anything like that, or we get into the next topic, which would then be figuring out your budget for your projects, which is really important for a lot of you guys. How do you control the spending? How do you set a number and accurately know that you're going to be within a few dollars of hitting that number? So we'll cover that on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to getting feedback from you guys, and I thank you guys for following me. Please share this video, and as always, create solutions, adapt processes, think strategically. Thank you guys.